The morning sun glared off the polished marble floors of the grand Hojo estate. Sido adjusted his glasses while staring at the legal document spread across the mahogany desk. Across from him, Akane gripped the edges of her skirt until her knuckles turned white. His grandfather's voice echoed through the room like a final judgment. The terms were simple: marry and live together for 1 year, or lose the entire inheritance. Akane stood up so abruptly that her chair screeched against the floor. She declared that she would never be sold like a piece of corporate property. Sido merely turned a page of the contract without looking at her. He reminded her that her family's debt was the only reason they were in this room. Akane flinched as if he had physically struck her with those words. With a trembling hand, she picked up the fountain pen from the desk. The sound of the ink scratching against the paper felt like a prison door closing. Sido signed his name with a flourish, his face a mask of indifference. An hour later, they were standing in front of a modern high-rise penthouse. Akane noted that the place felt more like a museum than a home. Sido threw his keys onto the counter and headed straight for the office. Akane yelled after him, demanding to know where her room was located. He pointed a single finger toward the second door on the left without stopping. She dragged her heavy luggage across the expensive carpet, grumbling under her breath. The room was filled with state-of-the-art tech and a view of the entire city. For a moment, the beauty of the skyline made her forget the trap she was in. A sudden knock on the door broke her brief moment of peace. Sido stood there, holding a printed list of house rules. Rule number 1 was that they were never to speak to each other at school. Akane snatched the paper and crumpled it into a ball immediately. She told him that his rules were as boring as his personality. He ignored the insult and walked away, reminding her that school started in 10 hours. The next morning at the school gates, Akane felt everyone's eyes on her. Sido walked past her without even a glance, as if she were a complete stranger. It was working, but the cold treatment stung more than she expected. Suddenly, Hamari ran up and threw her arms around Akane's shoulders. Hamari asked why Akane looked like she hadn't slept at all last night. Akane stammered an excuse about staying up late to study for the math finals. Hamari pointed out that Sido had the exact same dark circles under his eyes. Akane's heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to change the subject. Throughout the day, they played their roles perfectly, maintaining a cold distance. But during lunch, Akane found a note tucked into her textbook. The note simply said, "Roof," now in Sido's sharp, precise handwriting. She climbed the stairs to the rooftop, her footsteps echoing in the quiet stairwell. Sido was leaning against the fence, looking out at the city skyline. He told her that his cousin Shisei had already started asking questions about the apartment. Akane realized that if a family member found out, the secret would be over in hours. Just then, the heavy metal door to the roof creaked open behind them. A figure stood in the shadows, holding a phone with the camera pointed directly at them. Akane froze, realizing their secret marriage might have just been caught on film. Akane stared at the smartphone camera lens that had been peeking through the living room window. Sido lunged forward and pulled the heavy curtain shut with a swift, decisive motion. A familiar, mocking laugh echoed from the porch just outside the glass. The front door swung open without a knock, revealing Sido's cousin, Shisei, holding a gold-plated phone. Shisei stepped inside the house as if he owned the place, his designer shoes clicking on the marble floor. Akane demanded to know how he got a key, but Shisei only waved his phone in her face. Sido stood between them, his eyes narrowed into icy slits as he glared at his cousin. Shisei explained that the board of directors wanted proof that the marriage wasn't a total sham. Akane felt her heart race, wondering if they had already messed up their performance. Suddenly, a small figure darted past Shisei and tackled Akane in a tight hug. It was Maho, Akane's younger sister, who had apparently hitched a ride with the billionaire's cousin. Maho adjusted her glasses and began inspecting the room for any signs of romantic life. Sido sighed deeply, realizing his quiet evening had just turned into a battlefield of personalities. Shisei announced that he would be staying in the guest wing for the entire weekend to observe them. Akane protested loudly, but Maho pointed out that the house was legally owned by the family trust. The two rivals turned spouses were forced to share a single bedroom to keep up appearances. Sido threw a pillow onto the floor, insisting that he would take the hardwood for the night. Akane argued that as the guest, she should be the one to show humility and sleep on the floor. Their petty bickering was interrupted by Shisei knocking loudly on the bedroom door. In a panic, Akane tripped and fell directly on top of Sido on the mattress. Their faces were only inches apart, and Sido could feel the heat radiating from her cheeks. Shisei opened the door just enough to peek inside, seeing the two of them tangled together. He retreated with a clicking tongue, seemingly annoyed that they looked like a real couple. Akane scrambled off Sido immediately, her heart drumming against her ribs like a trapped bird. Sido sat up and stared at his hands, wondering why he didn't push her away sooner. The next morning, Maho cornered Sido in the kitchen while he was making coffee. She asked him if he remembered the summer festival from 10 years ago. Sido paused, a blurry image of a girl in a red yukata flashing through his mind. Maho revealed that Akane had kept a small, broken wooden charm in her jewelry box for a decade. Sido realized the charm matched the one he had lost when his family moved away as a child. Shisei interrupted the moment, demanding they prepare for a formal dinner with the family lawyer. Akane entered the kitchen, her eyes puffy as if she hadn't slept at all. She avoided Sido's gaze, her usual fiery energy replaced by a strange, hollow silence. Shisei began asking targeted questions about Akane's father's bankrupt business. Akane's hands began to shake as she tried to defend her father's legacy. Sido slammed his hand on the table, cutting off his cousin's interrogation with a loud thud. He reminded Shisei that insulting his wife was the same as insulting the future CEO of the company. Akane looked up at Sido, a single tear escaping and rolling down her cheek. Shisei laughed and walked away, claiming he had already seen enough to make his report. Once they were alone, Akane confessed that her family's debt was the real reason she agreed to the marriage. Sido reached out to comfort her, but his hand stopped midair as he noticed a hidden folder in her bag. The folder was labeled with the name of Sido's grandfather and a date from 20 years ago. Sido realized that Akane might have been investigating his family long before they were forced together. Outside in the hallway, Maho was speaking into a burner phone, her voice dropping to a whisper. She told the person on the other end that the plan to destroy the inheritance was ahead of schedule. Akane suddenly grabbed the folder and hugged it to her chest, her eyes darting towards Sido. Sido demanded to see what was inside, his voice low and dangerous. Akane backed away, screaming that he wouldn't understand the truth about his grandfather's past. A loud crash from the kitchen interrupted them as Shisei let out a piercing scream. They ran into the room to find Shisei pointing at a red envelope that had been slipped under the door. The envelope was addressed to the widow and was dripping with what looked like fresh ink. Akane's face went completely pale as she recognized the handwriting immediately. "It's from him," she whispered, her voice trembling with a secret from her dark past. Akane stared at the letter in her hands as the weight of her family's past secrets began to crush her spirit. Sido watched her from across the room, noticing the way her knuckles had turned white from gripping the paper. He wanted to reach out but remembered the distance she had kept between them since the arrival of her sister. Akane suddenly tore the letter into pieces, letting the fragments fall to the floor like autumn leaves. She decided that she would no longer let her family's debt dictate the person she chose to love. The next morning at school, the atmosphere felt unusually heavy as students whispered about the upcoming school festival. Hamari approached Sido at his locker, wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She suggested that they study alone after the festival, her tone carrying a suggestive edge. Akane saw them from the end of the hall, her chest tightening with an unfamiliar pang of jealousy. She realized that Hamari was finally making a move for the man she had claimed as her husband in secret. During lunch, Hamari intentionally sat close to Sido, offering him a homemade bento box. Sido accepted it out of politeness, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. Akane stormed onto the rooftop, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and betrayal. Hamari didn't back down, stating that a marriage of convenience was nothing compared to years of friendship. Sido stood up, finally realizing that the secret he and Akane shared had been discovered by their friend. Hamari laughed, telling Akane that Sido would never love someone as stubborn and loud as her. The words stung Akane more than any academic defeat she had ever suffered. She looked at Sido, searching for any sign that he agreed with Hamari's assessment. Sido stepped forward, his shadow falling over Akane to shield her from Hamari's gaze. He told Hamari that her friendship didn't give her the right to insult the woman he lived with. Hamari's facade finally crumbled as she realized she had lost her influence over him. She walked away without another word, leaving the husband and wife alone under the vast sky. A heavy silence settled between Sido and Akane as the wind rustled their school uniforms. Akane confessed that she hated the contract, but she hated the thought of losing him even more. Sido turned to her, his usual mask of indifference finally cracking to reveal a soft smile. He admitted that he had never viewed their marriage as just a way to get his grandfather's inheritance. Akane took his hand, her heart racing as she realized their feelings were finally aligned. They decided to tell the truth to their classmates and face the consequences together. The following week, they walked into the school gym hand in hand during the festival's closing ceremony. Gasp filled the room as the student body witnessed the two rivals appearing so close. Sido took the microphone and announced that Akane was not just his rival, but his wife. Akane stood beside him, blushing furiously but holding her head high with pride. Sido's grandfather watched the live stream from his office, initially furious at the breach of the secret contract. However, seeing the genuine happiness on Sido's face, the old man slowly began to smile. Back at the school, the initial shock of the students turned into cheers and applause for the unlikely couple. Months later, the two sat in their shared home, no longer separated by the tension of the contract. Sido placed a ring on the table, explaining that he wanted to marry her for real this time. Akane laughed through her tears, telling him that he was late because she had already decided to stay forever. They leaned in close, the billion-dollar inheritance forgotten in favor of the priceless love they had found. Under the soft glow of their home, the contract was finally signed with love instead of gold.